sovereign soul. I am stoked to share this beautiful human with every single one of you. I have been waiting for this conversation for years and years and years. I know you know that because, well, I've been telling you, you've got to share your 4 years. And
Yeah.
I've been waiting for this conversation. Who knew I'd be able to facilitate it? Like, that's amazing. I'm blessed and so honored to be able to do that. As all of you listeners know, we're focusing this April on rebirth, on renewal, on really being able to let me think of the word I want to say, re-identify with our lives, the blessings that we have through unfortunate situations that take place in our world that help us experience grief. And I say help us because we really, when we experience grief, we know a whole another level to blessings and to gifts when they occur. And so today's guest is going to wow you. This, I will tell you, friends, is going to be a 2-part interview. You will hear some of her story today, and then you'll get to come back next week to hear the end of it as well. Kaitlyn, hi.
Hello.
Thank you
How are
for
you?
coming on. I'm good. I'm so good. Thank you. Thank you. I would love for you to share a little bit about your story. And I want you to take it back to what we'll call the beginning, with regards to what you've had to become aware of medically.
Okay. So I've actually been interviewed, and I don't know if anybody listening heard. It was a couple of years ago you had me on. But I have a condition called hydrocephalus, which is too much fluid on the inside of your brain. And I didn't find out until I was 18. Most people find out either in utero or, generally speaking, when you're a baby. So what that translated for me was massive amounts of brain damage because I had too much pressure inside for too long. So through those experiences, I'm a Christian, and so it grew my faith because I had to rely on something bigger than me when I had basically nothing left. I didn't even have my health. It was just, I was in this world that I didn't really know. I had no clue of what it was like. I didn't really know where to go. I was this healthy 18-year-old until I wasn't. And it just, I don't know, there aren't words, like for a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about, there aren't words to describe. And I cry because it's just the way my body processes stuff. And I know people struggle with that. I've never struggled with crying. It's been the opposite because the whole world tells you you shouldn't be doing that, but I can't help it. So I apologize. I've learned to talk through it.
Yeah.
But it just happens.
No apologies needed. No apologies needed.
Yeah. So to make my long story kind of short, I had been experiencing headaches. I had like abnormal other things. And then finally one day I woke up after I graduated high school and I couldn't see straight. And so a couple of days later, I ended up having emergency brain surgery where they put a shunt, which has a tube that goes down and empties into your abdominal cavity. And that was fine for a couple of weeks, but I didn't really feel better. And then my brain started bleeding all over the place. And they kept saying, oh, we're just going to let it circulate itself out. You know, it'll be fine. You're fine. Except the symptoms weren't going away. They were getting worse. And I just felt kind of hopeless because here you have experts that do this every day and they're not able to help me. And they kept telling me that, like, if I was normal, I'd be dead. So don't worry. And I'm like, that's not comforting as an 18-year-old. It's just not.
Not at all.
Or for any age, to be honest, because I'm going to be 40 in April. So it's kind of interesting how this has become the rebirth, because it's actually my birthday or my birth month.
Yes.
I'm moving a toy of my daughter, so excuse me. But anyway, hold on, let me shut this off. You can edit that part out. Oh gosh, another one. See, this is why I wanted to get home early so I could get set up. Okay.
It's all good.
Edit
This
that
is
part
life.
out.
Yeah.
So they were telling me that I was, if I was quote unquote normal, I'd be dead. Meanwhile, my brain's just bleeding all over the place. And finally, I said to my mom, I was like, Mom, we need to go to a different doctor because this is not working. This person is great at what he does, but we're like falling outside of his realm of expertise. So because I was a Christian, or I am a Christian, I started praying specifically to Jesus. And I said, you need to help us find the right person, the right doctor, the right facility, because I don't know who that is. And my mom, as I was praying, like that exact moment, decided to call Children's Hospital in Boston. And we just happened to get an appointment the next day. You don't happen to get an appointment at Children's Hospital the next day with the right neurosurgeon. It just doesn't happen. But we were, guided.
Totally guided. Yep.
So I ended up having surgery a few weeks later. We met with her and she was like, yeah, you never should have been shunted. You should have this procedure. So I suggest that we do that. So in the interim, I'm still like sleeping 20 hours a day, in a lot of pain. And back then, and even today, medical, I don't know, I find in like in the neurosurgery world, they're not quick to give you medicine that actually helps you. And I think part of that is like what's going on in the pharmaceutical realm today. Like we don't want to prescribe narcotics, but I got to tell you, when your brain's bleeding and you have too much pressure, that's really the only thing that helps. So I was just in a lot of pain because they weren't giving that. And so FYI, if you see a tail, it's because he loves Jackie's energy. He just always comes around and I can't help it. And he'll cry if I lock him out. But anyway, so one night I woke up around 3 a.m. and I was miserable and I was done. You can get, I guess, 2 physical limitations of pain. You just get to the point where you just can't do it anymore. And so I woke up and I was really mad and I just was like, God, and I literally was like shaking my fist at him and I was like, just do something. And he let me complain for a little bit longer. And finally I heard him, and no, you don't hear like the physical audible sound of God, but for me, and the way he communicates with me, it's like a thought process. It's a whisper. And if you miss it, or if you blank, you miss it. And I always find myself going, what? But he asked me, he's like, are you done yet? Basically, are you done complaining? And I said, well, no, because I'm mad. And so he let me continue. And I did. And finally, he's like, are you finished? And I said, yeah. He goes, are you ready? And I'm like, ready for what? I've been miserable for years and you've done nothing. So what? And that's when I felt and heard the loudest, most deafening sound I've ever heard in my entire life. And it was him kissing me right here on my forehead. So that soothed my body. I went to sleep and went into the next surgery, had the surgery. They irrigated all the blood and everything was good. So that kind of prepared me for what was to come years and years down the road. And also he sprinkles himself with reassurances of those 2 experiences throughout the rest of my journey. And those are like the foundational things that help me get through the next I don't know, like I have started writing my book. So I think it's like chapters. It's the next chapters of that because there's just so much. and it all comes full circle. And the cool thing is like I'm talking to you now, and it's been almost 22 years since all of this stuff happened. And it's really cool when you get to the point where you can look back and you can say, that's why you did that.
Yep.
Even though it makes no sense right now, even though it hurts really bad right now.
Yeah, physically,
So,
for sure. Physically, emotionally, mentally, all of it.
yeah.
All of it. It really does test that faith muscle, you know, within us. And for you, you went on to maintain health, maintain all of what you're supposed to do medically with scans. To this day, you go once a year, do you not?
Yes, I do. Every July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've had
Except when I'm pregnant,
x-rays.
because I can't when we do.
Yeah, you don't want those stuff.
They don't allow
we don't
me
want
to.
those. But talk to me
Yeah.
about the shifts and changes specifically in the x-rays.
So the interesting thing, it's not just the MRIs looking the same, because they look pretty much the same, but it's the further testing that we've done on my hormones and different body systems. If you were to look at my scans, because that's what we call them, but MRIs, a normal medical person, a doctor, even a nurse, would be like, how is she functioning? Because like the back part of my brain, your cerebellum, is very squished. And typically, if you would see that in a, I would say acute situation, but even in a, like, even if you put it into like a child born with brain abnormalities, what that equals is loss of function, like not being able to walk, not being able to talk, not being able to use your hands, your arms. So based on what I look like, I should not be able to function. I shouldn't be a quote unquote normal person. So that's been interesting. Like I've always seen it, I've always known it, but like as the 22 years have progressed, more research is done. And so you find out like, oh my gosh, that controls this part too. And so like, for instance, the testing that I was referring to, most of my hormone levels are pretty much normal. And my pituitary gland, which is, you know, your main computer for your hormone production, it's flat. It's supposed to look like a cherry, and it's flat. It should not work, and it does. So that's been totally amazing. And one of the experiences that I had, I was getting ready to go to a scan. I live in North Carolina, but all my doctors are in Boston because that's where I'm originally from. And honestly, they just have the best medical care, in my opinion.
Sure.
So I go back there for scans every year. But I was walking on my driveway. I remember exactly, like clear as day, like this happened yesterday. I was walking on my driveway, and it was a steep driveway. And I said, God, wouldn't it be really cool if I just looked normal? And he goes, no, it's really cool that you function completely normally, even though you look like that.
Yeah.
He goes, that's what's more important.
Yeah.
And I had a hard time with that answer because I really just wanted to be better.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. I just really wanted to be normal.
Surgery after surgery after surgery. I think anybody would want that normalcy. You know,
well, anything when you get diagnosed with something, you want to be back to the way you were, or get to the point where you're supposed to be. And that's just not going to happen, and that's okay. But that's the lesson, is like some things like everything happens for a reason. Everything is part of the plan. And even when it totally doesn't make sense, it will.
Yeah, it totally will. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think I won't tell you what I think. Tell me what the greatest lesson was that you can really pinpoint today, having gone through that medical struggle that you had then.
Well, it's still a struggle. I mean, I still am affected. Like I had a baby last year, and I had really like I basically couldn't nurse. Like it just, there were too many things between her and me that it just didn't work. And I don't know that I wasn't capable, but again, between like her factor and like it just was not working. And in a
Sure.
normal person, like my part would have still worked, even
Mm,
though I don't know.
mm.
So rephrase or I guess ask me the question again, because I got a little sidetracked in my thought.
Sure. No, with the brain surgeries and the countless hours in medical doctors' offices and prognoses and all of what was done to essentially bring the body into some normalcy, regulating hormones and things of that nature. Through all of the ups and downs, the emotional roller coaster, the physical pain, what are some of the greatest lessons that you've learned having gone through that?
The greatest lesson, hands down, is advocacy for yourself,
Mm,
and knowing, having an intuitive relationship with yourself, A, um, and then B, having for me at least, because I'm drawn to it, is having the medical knowledge to be able to
mhm.
have a medical conversation with a physician is very important to me.
Yeah.
So there's like three things underneath that advocacy umbrella, if you will. Um, so I've studied a lot about myself. I've studied a lot about the brain function. So I can tell them like, nah, I think it's this. Um, so the advocacy part of that is huge.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of people that you see, meaning physicians, they're taught a certain way, and we become bodies. We're not people.
Right.
The good ones, you're still a person. The bad
Yeah.
ones, you're not.
Yeah.
The good ones will say, oh, let me hear more. Like, let me learn about you. The bad
Right.
ones will tell you like how great they are. I'm like, no, no,
Mhm.
no. I'm an anomaly and we have a
Mhm.
working relationship. And so I think that translates for anyone. Like, I don't care
Sure.
what you're dealing with. If you know you and you know how that like translates medically, then you should stick up for yourself because you are an expert on you. Um,
Absolutely.
and I literally have worked on asking my body what's wrong. And
I love that.
without fail, like when I get with myself in a quiet place and I start to meditate and like kind of separate, I ask what's wrong, and like 95% of the time it will tell me. And
Yeah.
FYI, it's usually because I haven't had enough water. But
Yeah. Okay.
anyway,
Yeah.
I'm bad
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So, one of the things we've talked before, I know your story very well. One of the things that God promised you through the ordeal was that there would be love, there would be children, there would be blessings through your
Mhm.
world, even at times when you wondered if that was going to be possible, if that was going to happen.
Well, I was told it
Um,
wasn't going to happen, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, fast forward a few years when you met Mr. Chip. Talk to me about Mr. Chip.
So Chip was my first husband, and we were together for 13 years. I actually met him when I was in college, and I was the babysitter. Didn't happen that way, but I was the babysitter. His first wife passed away of brain cancer. Well, it matters because
It does.
it's how our relationship formed. Um, but his wife had passed away from brain cancer, melanoma that metastasized to her brain. And so I came into my stepdaughter's and Chip's life when I was in college just to help out. I would pick up Lindsay from school and, do homework and all that. And so Chip and I never really saw each other, but always kind of connected because of his relationship with Terry and the things that they had gone through.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was fresh off of brain surgery. Like we both were grieving different things. I was grieving myself. He was grieving his wife. And so we just kind of always like connected. And I left, I graduated, moved back to Massachusetts from North Carolina, and kind of kept in touch. But one day, I don't know, it was like somebody was just going, you got to call him. So I had to call him and wish Lindsay a happy birthday, but I could never remember her birthday. And I always remember everyone's birthday. So that was super weird. And we talked that day for like an hour, and I forgot to wish her a happy birthday. And it was just kind of, I guess it was, it was just meant to be. And so we started dating and we got back together. I moved down and whatever. So fast forward 13 years, and we finally get married. And 50 days later, he passed away of a massive heart attack while I wasn't home. And that was devastating on so many levels. I can't even, it's been almost 4 years, and I was crying about it this morning because I heard a song. It's just still there. And I write about grief. And I'm, I participate in certain boards on Facebook and stuff and Instagram. And one of the things I talk about is grief doesn't ever go away. Mm-mm. And again, you don't have to be grieving a person. You can grieve about brain surgery. You can grieve about, the pet that you lost. It doesn't matter. It doesn't go away. It changes. It morphs. I don't know. If you choose to see the blessings, you see the blessings. But you can choose not to. I don't know. I've always had this period. I've always had these points in my healing process where I knew it was a decision to get better or not.
Right. Where it was your choice.
Yeah. There's always a choice. And for me, do you know what I mean? And I've dealt with depression. I've dealt with, the mental and nervous part. I've been on medicine. But there's always a choice where I think who you are, the essence of who you are, really just wants to be better. And so you choose to work on that. And it's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I think that's one of the things that goes against us. It's I think people think if they make ABC choices, then everything will be better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's just not that. And sometimes you just have to keep walking. One of the things with grief is I don't know when I'm going to feel better. I don't know when it's going to change. I do know it will change. And so I choose to just keep walking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let it reveal myself, reveal those things to me.
Well, and I think, grief teaches us so much, not just about ourselves, but about the world. I think that grief is something that, yes, shifts and changes, but comes with its own territory of awareness, if that makes sense. Unless someone has also struggled with the loss of someone that close. It's very hard for someone to really understand why it lasts so long or how it feels still so vivid and real, and
because you have cellular memory.
100%. And I think that society, you and I have spoken a lot about sharing your story to start to shift society's views, about how people don't have to shy away from asking the question of, are you okay? And is there something that I can do? And even though there really isn't.
Yeah. The shift needs to come in the expectation of the answer. Because the answer is always going to be, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I'm really sad.
Yeah.
When you ask a grieving person that, and that might not be what they say, it might come out in anger or whatever, but the base of it is, I'm not okay and I'm really sad.
Right. Right.
And what I found is that when people people don't ask and they act like it doesn't exist.
Sure.
Which I don't let people do. I'm kind of hey, I don't feel good and I'm really sad and I'm going to start crying right now. But we need to expect that people are not okay and just meet them where they are. And you talk about holding space. It's there's nothing you can say that's going to bring that person back.
Right.
Because when I found Chip dead, there was nothing more that I wanted to do than to, I remember visually, I could still feel him. He was kind of hovering. And that's why I was confused, because I'm like looking at him and he's not alive, because live people don't look dead. And yes, if it's triggering, I'm sorry, but I don't do triggers. I just deal with my stuff. And that sounds bad, but I'm like, I just have never. But anyway, but I felt him and I'm like, are you alive? And I pushed on his chest and like the last bit of air comes out of his mouth. And I'm like, okay, so you're not. And I remember the world like stopping, like time literally stopped. And I remember going like, I don't even know what to do right now. And then somebody was like, yo,
call
like,
911.
snap into action, call 911. Like, you need to do this stuff. But time stopped. And so getting back to what I was saying though, is like, there was nothing more that I wanted to do than like reach up and open the door to heaven and pull him back. But I couldn't. And so to think that we're going to be able to have words that's going to fill that void and make that person better is just an unrealistic expectation.
Absolutely. And even the person grieving in this moment, they understand that. They, you know, I think that the avoidance is what makes someone who's dealing with grief that much more heavy in an energy. Do you know? Like, I feel like, you know, when we've talked about it,
feel that much more isolated and lonely than you already
alienated and alienated 100%. Like, we can't, you know, and there's a lot of people that choose, or by their choosing, don't feel comfortable in someone's energy when they're in that space. They can't.
Oh, no one does.
Okay. You know what I mean? Like,
does.
It's hard to sit and watch someone feel the way they feel and just hold space for them. Many people, you know,
it's vulnerability.
Exactly. And it's
We're
also
uncomfortable with it.
a helplessness.
Yeah.
A helplessness when it's two whens, but when what this person really wants is for you to be there. They don't need you to talk.
You don't have to say anything.
Not
I always say,
all.
just show up and
Just
say,
show up.
hey, let's watch a movie. Because again, we know that there's nothing you are going to say or do that's going to bring that person back, because you can't, like, you can't pull them back.
No.
So it's like, we know this, but we can't communicate what we need. And I remember, but I've gotten good at it. So people are like, what do you need? And I'm like, just take me out to dinner. Or like, come over and have dinner at my house. Like, I don't care. Just be here. And like, we can talk about him. It's not like a no talking zone.
Absolutely. And, you know, to your credit, I think that being able to be in touch to yourself enough to know that this is what I'm in need of in this moment, being able to ask for it, that to someone who's suffered trauma and a deep amount of grief, it's not easy for them to do. They don't even know. What would you speak to them? To someone who has had that loss? Well, maybe not to what they don't know, but for someone who has suffered great loss, what would you speak to them with regards to how they could go about touching the wound, so to speak?
One of the things that you and I worked on was journaling, because I hate it. I do it with, I don't even know the word, because I just procrastinate on it. But anyway, journal, because I still haven't found the one right after he died that I got for that. I lost it. It's gone. And you said to me one day, you're like, it's not supposed to be found. And I never lost it. Like, I literally think it got thrown away, because I have no idea where it is. And there was some dark stuff in there, because there were moments where I didn't want to be here anymore. Because I'm like, my whole life for the last 13 years just got blown to pieces. And I don't know what that looks like. At all. And I'm not supposed to reread that stuff. I remember writing it, but I know there's stuff that I don't remember that I wrote. But I'm not supposed to reread it. You're not, journal, because it does help you process in that moment, because you will reread it and go, whoa, like, I need to deal with some stuff. But also, find your true core, and I wouldn't say find your true people. I've gotten more comfort from people I don't know than people that know me. And I think it's because we can be vulnerable with people we don't know, because there is an expectation
Exactly.
of what we're supposed to be doing based on that other person that knows us,
And
like what they think we should be doing.
Well, and vice versa. Somebody that doesn't know you is going to really be able to give it to you, hold space for you in that proper way, where people that know us often, what can I say that she might want to hear? Or what can I say that, do you know what I'm saying? So even those that are closest to us, you know, they don't know how to show up. They don't know what to say, and often have also struggled with the same loss that we have. They can't even identify their grief, go into their energies as to what's going on and how they're feeling, to then try and hold space for someone else. It's impossible. So I go ahead.
Often the people that we're relying on in those situations are grieving too.
Yeah.
So how are you gonna rely on somebody that's grieving in their own way?
Yeah.
When you're the primary person, but there's still a whole bunch of people in your like outer circles that are also grieving.
Exactly. Yeah.
So finding groups that didn't know me, and I could just be me. And one of the things that I've read about grief and definitely wholeheartedly agree with is grief, the death of someone or something, throws us into an instant state of vulnerability.
Yep.
And most people aren't comfortable with vulnerable people.
It's true.
And so you need to find, like, as what Chip and I would say, other Martians who speak Martian.
Yeah. Who can understand and support you.
Yeah.
I think the greatest,
like, that's why Chip and I, our relationship grew, was because we didn't really need to talk about what we were actually talking about, because we already knew.
We understood it, and it understood each other, you know. And I think that's the biggest message that anyone suffering with grief needs to hear. It is okay to seek some help outside of you. It's okay, you know, to seek it out and ask for it and put yourself in supportive situations. You know, you're not going to be looked at as weak. You're not going to be looked at as someone incapable of handling emotions. Yeah, exactly. You need the support now more than ever. The last thing we want is to not acknowledge what's going on and to just sweep it under the carpet, or to just pick up tomorrow and just keep going on and not acknowledge the beautiful gift that grief also allows us to experience, which is a greater depth of love awareness, you know, because our loved ones on the other side, you know, again, they're not physical in form, but they are most definitely still.
They're very present. I get pennies.
Very present. Yep. We are going to be going in a little bit deeper, and following up a bit on how anyone out there struggling with grief, and we want to identify grief a little bit as well. I want to help you recognize that grief can be anything from the loss of a pet, the loss of a loved one, to the loss of a job, to the collective energy that's around having, you know, these big world experiences like COVID, having these big world experiences like isolation, having these big world experiences like war and, death and things of that nature on a bigger scale. You don't necessarily have to have connection to it to feel it. We are all sensitive, energetic beings. And we are all going to be affected in one way or another by that stream of energy that is flowing at all times, if you want to call it that. There is a big, huge influx of energy whenever something in the big world takes place. And so whether you watch the news or not, chances are you're going to have this energy come through, and you could identify with it in an energy of grief. And you don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to handle it. You're confused as to why you are wanting to cry a lot. You know, it is an inability to really allow us to, I should say this, unhealed grief prevents us from welcoming that next level of love in. unhealed grief can prevent us from reaching greater depths within ourselves around how we love ourselves and how we show up for ourselves, and really how we carry on in life to welcome in more amazing blessings, which are always love, you know? So tell me, Kaitlyn, more about what you were able to do for yourself. You know, I know when we started working together, Chip had not been gone for very long
A week,
by that time.
literally a
No.
week. I think I called
Yeah.
you, or I reached out to you like a couple days after he had passed, because I was just, as he would have said, buzzing.
Yeah.
When someone passes away, there is this energy that morphs and changes, and you do feel it. You literally
Mhm.
feel like you're buzzing, and it lasts, I don't know, probably about a month for me. And I just, because it was so sudden and it wasn't expected, and I think that has something to do with it too, because it just feels like it's just that being has been ripped from you, and you don't, there's this like hole, there's this huge
Yeah.
hole that you don't even know what to do with, and you don't
Yeah.
even know how to fill it so you can like temporarily get through. You
Yeah.
just, yeah, I don't know. So we were talking before, reaching out to people who are similar people, beings, Martians, it's
Sure.
weird, I don't know.
Like-minded or
Yeah.
like-minded people. Yeah. Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
just you become this person that, I always said after brain surgery, because with my brain surgeries, I didn't lose, they didn't shave my whole head.
Mhm.
So I had brain surgery and nobody knew. I looked
Mm.
exactly the same, which is a blessing and a curse all at the same
Yeah.
time. Because in some way you really just wish people knew, but it's really a blessing that they don't, because you get
Yeah.
to just be you.
Sure.
But I reached out to Jackie because I needed a space, again, as I was referring to before, where I could just be me. I could just feel the feelings that I'm feeling, talk about them, and not have somebody say, well, you should do this or you should do this. And so what Jackie and I worked on was getting inside, healing stuff about brain surgery, because there was still some
Mhm.
there.
Yep.
And one of the things I didn't talk about brain surgery was my last surgery. I had physical complications. So I had always had the blessing of everybody not knowing. And then I woke up from my fourth surgery and my left eye was pointing towards my nose. And God completely healed that. And that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
But grief is kind of the same way. It's like you're totally different, but nobody knows. And so
Yeah.
you have to work through that process. And so
Yeah.
Jackie and I got in there and just, it was a lot of meditation, being still, allowing me to just settle into my new space,
Mhm.
figuring out what that space was.
Sure.
Because every single part of my life was different. The way that I ate,
Absolutely.
the way that I slept, nothing was the same.
Yeah.
And so even the way that I worked, like Chip and
Yeah.
I worked,
Because you were business partners. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, we were together 24/7. I always say we went from 24/7 to 0.
Yeah. That's hard.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. And there were times, I was writing about this yesterday. There were times where I just wanted to be outside of my body
Mhm.
because I did not feel comfortable anywhere.
Yep.
I
Yep.
thought that like if I changed my surroundings, like for a while I went up to Massachusetts, back to my family, stayed there for like about a month. And then I'm like, okay, this isn't working. I need to be at home. I
Yeah.
need to see my stepdaughter. I need to do all these things. And every single time, like I didn't feel better.
Yeah.
There was this like anxiousness. And
Yeah.
so Jackie kept going, like, you just have to deal with it. You have to work through it and heal.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, how do I do that?
Exactly. It's true because
And there's
it
no
sounds
prescribed
so,
answer, though. That's the other
no,
thing, too. It's so different because you're walking into your current situation with other baggage from the past. So, what
absolutely.
works for me won't work for other people.
Right.
It just
Yeah.
won't.
It
Um,
won't. But when we say work on it, you just have to work on it. It is about working in the energy and motion, the emotion that's present for you at that time. I remember days when, we would communicate and it was a very heavy day and we were okay. Allow
I
yourself to
cried
experience it.
the whole
But then
session.
but then there were days when you felt really high and really good, and messages from him were even coming through, and so much was shifting and changing. So the ebb and the flow that we experience in a daily perspective, it's just increased and more up and down when you're really shifting energy. And grief is one of those energies that really calls us to shift. It really calls us to do the work internally, to move energy out, because holding on to it, it only makes us, prevent the connection that we could absolutely have with the deceased and departed loved one. They are always wanting to communicate.
It forms a blockage.
Absolutely.
Like you think it's going to increase the flow, and you're going to be able to feel better, but it does it creates this blockage. And so you just have this backed up energy that just feels awful.
Yep.
100% anxious and awful.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, we worked together for a few years, really going through lots of different things that came up. That was the onset because of the grief and because of the loss and because of your ability to really identify with, here was grief, in a physical pain and physical experiences, the brain surgeries. Here was grief, which was the loss, of a beautiful soul. He loves hearing that, the beautiful soul that he was in the physical world.
I know.
And then, as you did this work, you really began, and it was beautiful as your friend and your mentor, to see you really begin to open yourself up again and truly believe that love still exists for you. At that time, you believed that love still existed for you here in the physical world. And you were really ready to take everything that you had gone through and bring in that being that was going to support you, bring in that being that was going to hold space for you in a whole new way. And it was still working with you that Jim made his appearance.
Yeah. And I will back up to when my niece was born in 2011. God told me some things about my future, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And I'm like, whatever. Yeah. Just totally just brushed it off. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Haha, whatever. But this next part, it makes sense. So yeah, we were still working together, and I will say I've always kind of struggled with loneliness. I think a ton of people do.
Yeah.
And I definitely do. It's not necessarily having to do something all the time, but really truly being alone. And again, that 24/7 to 0, Chip and I would be in the same house, but I'd be in one section and he'd be in the other, but you don't feel lonely because that if you can get up, walk in the other room and be like, hey, let's go do something. So from 24/7 to 0, I was having a hard time. And it's weird. I've struggled with admitting that.
Yeah. No, I mean, you struggled with seeing it too, to be completely fair, if I may say that, if I may call you out on it, because we did a lot of work around that loneliness and being okay in the stillness and being okay in the quiet, and knowing that, I can remember countless times, that partner, that beautiful partnership that you're looking for can't come in until this work that you were meant to do on yourself happens first. Your soul desired that work in this time, this gap of time before welcoming in. No, you definitely didn't. She didn't want to journal. She didn't want to do it. She didn't want to meditate. But we often don't, when we know that there's powerful things that we could shift or change your experience by doing them. We often are our worst critics when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah. But so the loneliness was really hard to deal with. And so I remember working with you, and I started dating, and it wasn't for the intention of actually being with somebody. It was just to get out of the house. I really just needed to get out of the house and not be me. Not live my life, just
to numb
create this new life.
Yeah. To
the
numb
old life is gone. couldn't bring him back. That door was closed, literally slammed shut in my face. And I was just going to create this new life and everything was going to be fine. I did create a new life. I still deal with stuff because you always do. This morning I was crying about Chip. So like it just, you hear a song and you're like, there's just moments. Cause like in my career, I've been pretty successful since he's passed away. And I just want to call him up and be like, Huff, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I can't.
Yeah.
You know, like when I close the big deal, it's like, I can't, you know, celebrate. Like it's just, that's the one thing that's just really, really hard because it just stops. But yeah, so I started dating and just casually, nothing serious. But I did find Jim. And it was kind of funny because he was not like high on the list. It was just one of those like, oh, here's another one. Because by the time I got to him, I had been on a couple of dates and I was kind of over it. I was like, I'm not going to do this. I had kind of decided that I'm just not going to deal with dating because I'm old. And well, no, I felt I was older than the people that I was generally meeting. And I was looking for a certain person. Meaning like not necessarily like divorced, I didn't really care, but like I didn't really want them to have kids, which at 38, well, how old was I? 38, 37, 36, somewhere in there. That's like not, when you live in the South, that's not common. Up north, maybe, but not down here. Everybody's married by the time they're like 24. So the kids part, because I had already been with somebody who had a kid, there's just this dynamic that is just hard to overcome. So I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. Whatever. So I kind of had these rules and God was laughing at me, but Jim, I clicked on one of his pictures and I didn't say anything to him because I'm one of those people that I don't like to pursue men. I'm like, you're going to pursue me if you like me. So he's like, did you click on my picture? And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how this works. And so
this is how you do this app.
It's kind of how match.com works. But anyway, so we ended up dating. We went out on a couple dates and I don't know, we just kind of hit it off. We're not perfect, but we work together. And so things progressed quickly. Got criticism for that, but you can't control some things. You just can't control as much as you want it to be a certain way. It just doesn't always happen that way. And so we ended up getting engaged. And then the baby that I wasn't supposed to have, according to medical science, also came. And that was the piece that God told me about things. God told me when I was holding my niece that I would have one just like her in 10 years. And Miss Harper Quinn was born February 5th of 2021, almost like in the 10th year of my niece's life. And she's precious. She looks like me with blue eyes and everybody's like, oh, she looks like her dad. I'm like, no, not really. And she's sweet. So so things, like I said, everything happens for a reason. And it's painful sometimes. Like no one promises that it's going to be sunshine and roses all the time. Like it just doesn't happen that way.
Absolutely. I think that it is something that clearly never came with a rule book, right? Clearly never came with some sort of manual that helped us see through it. But it is absolutely something that is easier navigated when you give yourself the grace and when you give yourself the time, because it's going to be different for everyone. But when you give you the time, you hold your own space to have new awarenesses, to heal things, to see the blessings and appreciate, the gifts that you were given, even if it was, a short period of time. Remember, grief is grief. It can come in, like I said, from the loss of a loved one, from loss of a job, having life just completely shift and change from what it used to look like yesterday to what it looks like today. Sweeping it under the carpet isn't something that is going to help you move beyond it. It will always come back because it's meant to be something that you see to heal, not to set you back, but to help you grow and expand. And the beautiful life that you've been able to create for yourself from start to finish really has really begun to bring the sweetness, the things that you've always desired, the things that you have, really wanted to manifest for so long to fruition.
Since I was little.
To fruition, right? And yeah, I want this message, I want this conversation, last week's and today's, to be something that those struggling with grief, hear and find very valuable and comforting, because while we don't want stuff, we don't want to struggle, we don't want to suffer. We didn't come here as spiritual beings to this physical experience to have that happen. Your story is going to make a very big impact in people's lives, and they will then also feel heard, feel seen, that the loss that they suffered can take time, and can become something that they reconnect or reestablish some sort of a relationship with,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've always said that I'm willing to go through the hard stuff if it makes other people's journeys easier.
Yeah.
Because I wish I had someone like me while I was going through brain surgery to tell me stuff that I know now.
Right.
And I do that for other people.
Yeah. And it is such a blessing. It is such a blessing.
It is.
Such a blessing.
For me too, to be able to just, I'm not telling them what to do. I'm just telling them what happened to me. Yeah. And it's like, if you can take my struggles, any piece of what I've been through, and to help you, then it's all worth it.
100%. 100%. And I love it. And I'm so grateful again for you coming on and being interviewed and sharing your story with everyone. I'm excited for them to see us on YouTube, hear us all the places where you hear podcasts, and for them to really give feedback, on how this has shifted some perspective or helped them feel comforted in some way. So thank you again for hopping on.
Thank you for
spending some time with me. Absolutely. That concludes another episode of The Sovereign Soul. I hope you will share this out. Make sure that you drop the links for yourself where people can connect with you, Kaitlyn, so that people can follow up on the book that you're writing and purchase it when it comes out.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Excited. Thank you, everyone.